Hey guys, so by the time you're watching this video, I probably already presented the results on Farfa Subathon, but for those of you that missed it, basically what I did was I surveyed players in the Yu-Gi-Oh community just so we can learn more about us. And so essentially 1,600 players responded, so a huge thanks to all of you who participated, who shared the survey, and definitely follow me on Twitter to make sure that you don't miss out on any future surveys. And so before we continue, big thanks to my sponsors as always, links and discount codes in the description below for Yu-Gi-Oh singles and Yu-Gi-Oh supplies. So let's just get right into the demographic part of the question, starting with the age. And so for the most part, at least among the players that responded to this survey, they were in the 19 to 24 and 25 to 29 age group for the most part. It's really not surprising. This is sort of reflects the age where you kind of gain financial independence, right, after high school. So not too surprising. What I think is interesting, that 30 to 39 age group, which is where I belong, I think that portion will probably start increasing over time, right? Kind of, because if you think about, the anime came around, I think around 2002, that's when I was like a little kid, and that demographic, that cohort, definitely gonna start to age out and enter that 30 plus age group. In terms of gender identity that you most identify with, mostly male, again, probably not too surprising, but 87%. When I've been doing this like the last 2 years prior to this, I believe this was actually in the very high 90s, so more diversity is always great. Now let's cover the country of residence, and I'm only going to just cover the top 5. There's of course a lot of people from different countries around the world that responded, which is really cool. So essentially USA was number 1. Not too surprising as well, just because especially my YouTube audience, it's actually about half are from USA, I believe. UK, Germany, some European influence, and Canada, where I belong. And then Poland, so that's also interesting. Definitely don't have that in my YouTube analytics in terms of audience, but definitely really appreciate all of you across the world responding to this survey. So in terms of how players categorize themselves as a player, 43% being casual, but 33% being semi-competitive, which essentially kind of reflects at least participating at local level events, but just probably not really regional level events or higher. And then competitive, of course, at least regional level events or higher that they participate in. And then like 1% that's considered non-player, so those could be considered as let's say like vendors or maybe artists. I'm not sure, but I think this is actually kind of an important breakdown to take into consideration for all the results moving forward in this video, just because we do have a little bit more competitive players that responded than likely the actual Yu-Gi-Oh population, where there's probably a lot more casual players if you were to somehow survey like the entire Yu-Gi-Oh population. Now, in terms of the primary reason that led you to decide to Yu-Gi-Oh, almost half said that was because of from watching the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. I think that's how a lot of us kind of grew up with that, and then it really got us into it. Of course, if you were like me, when the Yu-Gi-Oh anime first came out and you were a kid, the rules were definitely not the rules that actually encompasses that trading card game. It was definitely has some really wonky rulings, but it was still really fun nonetheless. Watching friends play the game or seeing Yu-Gi-Oh content online, for example, that's a very big one in the more modern era. Or maybe they were already playing a different TCG and they wanted to try something new. To be honest with you, this survey question, the response choices I had, I already knew. It was pretty limited. I wish I could have thought of more, because we did have quite a bit in the other section. A lot of people actually just said that they were just bored and they decided to play it. That was one of the common reasons that were mentioned in the other section. So interesting nonetheless, but I'm really happy to see how people kind of got into this game. In terms of what other TCGs they do play, of course, more than half actually said they don't play any other TCGs. I mean, to be fair, I think, it is pretty hard to invest in multiple card games at once, not only the cost, but also just the time. But if they did play any other TCGs, most looks like Magic, Pokemon again, which is pretty common, or rather makes sense, because these are some of the most common TCGs in the game right now. Disney Lorcana is kind of new. From my understanding, it's pretty limited in terms of supply right now and also quite expensive, but I'm sure that will increase. I thought One Piece would be a little higher because I thought it was actually like exploding in terms of popularity. But you know what? I think this, for the most part, pretty interesting, all the other TCGs that players are using. So now let's just cover some of the questions related to competitive play in terms of, how often do you actually participate in these official tournaments by Konami. So 39% actually said they don't participate at all. But among those that do participate, you do see that, most are actually only playing like less than 1 or 1 per week. Definitely not too many grinders out there in terms of, 3+ per week. Now, in terms of, the highest level of achievements in competitive play, 35% saying they do not participate. Kind of weird, because 39% said they don't participate in that previous question. Anyways, you're bound to see those inconsistent results in surveys. Most have like up to, local top at best, which makes sense. That's kind of like the most common outcome, really. Regional tops get a little confusing. So, a lot of people get the terminology mixed up, and it might also actually depend on the area, perhaps. Like in North America, for example, in regional events, you have, if you say you top the regional, that means top 8. but at the same time, usually up to like, let's say top 48 or top 32, you can also get an invite to the North American World Championship qualifier, which is not topping a regional, but just means you at least earned an invite at a regional. So I try to distinguish that in the survey question. I'm not sure if everyone really understood that, but at the same time, you know, you kind of see like 8.5% got up to an invite only, and then almost 10% getting a regional top 8. And then, you know, some national top, YCS top, obviously a very small proportion of people world participant, which is really cool that they actually participated in the survey. Now, in terms of, you know, what players thought of remote duel tops, because this can definitely be a bit of a controversial topic, but you know what, a little over 70% actually believe that they still count as a remote, or still count as a premier event top, for example, but perhaps, you know, 40% feeling that they're not as impressive as an in-person event top, with a small percent, 4% rather, thinking that they don't count at all. Now, ultimately, in my view, I don't think it's up to any of us to decide whether someone else's remote duel top counts or not. You know, if it counts to them, it counts to them. That's what matters most. Now let's cover some of the cost aspect of this game. So to play this game competitively, the players felt that, you know, it is very expensive or somewhat expensive. Again, fair. I don't think it, I think people who say it's not expensive at all, that 0.1% probably trolling. Realistically, this game has been rather expensive for quite a while, especially to play competitively. Has it gotten better or worse in the past year? I don't know if it has been really all that noticeable, but at the very least, it definitely hasn't gone noticeably better. Now, in terms of the level of concern on spending on this game, 12% saying very concerning and 36% saying not at all concerning, and, you know, somewhat in between for the two other levels of concern. Definitely understandable. You know, it definitely can be a bit of an addicting game for sure. And just, you know, at least hopefully you are still taking care of yourself first in terms of, you know, taking care of your rent, utilities, rather than prioritizing Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, in terms of the amount of sealed product players purchased in the past month, looks like most players actually did not spend anything at all. Now, some of you may be wondering, you know, you're only asking for the past month, but what if it just happened to be a month where they barely spent anything, or they spent way too much compared to their usual spending? And that's fair, but whenever it comes to these kind of survey questions, the further you go back in terms of recall period, the more, you know, the accuracy becomes a little bit more questionable, and it's very hard to recall accurately. And so I decided to cut it off as the most recent months, just so that it is, you know, easier to remember. And with Yu-Gi-Oh!, you know, they do actually release product pretty much almost every month now at this point, so I felt it was actually still a fair question to ask. Now, in terms of favorite sealed product, most do believe it's a reprint set. I mean, do keep in mind, again, in terms of our audience that responded to the survey, most are actually elites at the semi-competitive level. And so, you know, for those of us, you know, we definitely like reprint sets like Mega Tins, as well as like Battles of Legends sets, just because they give you those, you know, expensive staples and kind of provide a better accessibility for those cards. Structure decks are also always nice because, you know, oftentimes nowadays, you know, those structure decks can be used to become like meta decks, right? So it's nice to have. And then core, maybe if I split the core side booster sets, the response could have been a little bit different, but nonetheless, the rest of the sets looks like there's not much of a preference. Now, let's cover some questions as it relates to Konami and our thoughts on them. And so first question is our attitude towards Konami. And so about half actually felt, you know, it was quite negative or very negative attitude towards Konami. But you know what, 42% being around neutral. So, you know what, Konami definitely does, you know, they do have their flaws, right? Like particularly, let's say, communication to the player base. That's always been a weakness of theirs, you know, especially when it comes to ban list announcements, and as well as like some short printing as well, and some others. But you know what, I think we should also, despite the flack, we should also give them some credit, or at least maybe a lot of credit, because they did in fact are able to keep this game alive for this long and still maintaining a good amount of players participating in tournaments. Now, in terms of pricing at premier level events, this has been a hot topic recently, actually, and you know, like a majority of the players do believe that the pricing is very, very low, and I think that's fair, especially when compared to the other TCGs when they actually have pretty good cash pricing, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not have any form of cash pricing, and even the prize cards nowadays, you know, if you could sell it, it has not been going for that high. And speaking of prize cards, essentially I would ask if it should be, you know, a meta relevant card or something like right now where it's just another plain vanilla kind of card. Most people do believe that it should not be a meta relevant card. Now, something that was interesting that I saw in some of the comments was that they were asking if I meant meta relevant as in, you know, like an existing staple card but just printed in some like new like championship rarity or something. That was not what I had in mind. It was interesting though. I never even thought of that. I believe that hasn't happened yet though. What I meant was more so like a new card that's meta relevant, right? Something along the lines of like Minerva, or like that Chaos Emperor Pendulum card that honestly came out like maybe I think around 4 years ago as a prize card. So it was still, you know, they were printing like meta relevant prize cards like even pretty recently, but nowadays they're not. But it looks like at least most players feel that they should not be a meta relevant card. Now, in terms of whether the lack of cash prizing is kind of like causing you to lose interest in playing competitively, it was actually very split evenly. I think for most of us, we're not one of those top players that we're traveling to every event, right? And so for us, like the cash prizing probably isn't making much of a difference in terms of whether we participate in these events or not. But for those top players who are committing and traveling and participating in all these premier level events, yeah, I could definitely see why it would definitely cause them to lose some interest, and they definitely do deserve better prizing in my view. Now, in terms of the frequency that the Konami releases the ban list, over half felt that it's not frequent enough. But you know what, a big chunk at 40% actually do feel that the way they do it right now is actually pretty much just right. There's like that tiny fraction thinking that's released too frequently. I'm not really sure about that. Maybe those are like the vendors who really want the market to be a little bit more stable. Who knows? But interesting to see. In terms of the frequency of the ban list, optimal frequency rather, most actually believe it should be every 3 months, which is essentially what it is right now. For the most part, they do get released every 3 months. A couple lists prior though, they were actually released in 2-month intervals, which I actually kind of like, but I do think that perhaps if that constantly happens, maybe that's not too good either. Whenever you have too frequent ban lists, and it does get a little hard where can you really invest into a deck, or is it just going to be unplayable in like the next 3 months, right? So there's definitely some pros and cons in terms of the frequency. 4 months, we've had that happen recently as well, and that honestly felt way too long. Hopefully we don't get to that level again. Okay, so now let's cover some questions related to just the Yu-Gi-Oh! Online simulator of choice. And so Master Duel has definitely overtaken as the #1 by far at 50%. Prior to Master Duel releasing about a year and a half ago, it was definitely a dueling book at #1, at least among competitive players for sure. EDO Pro, YG Omega is still around a similar amount, and Dueling Nexus is also still there. It's definitely, I think, the easiest one to start with in terms of like new Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, for example. That's how I actually started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, at least, or semi-competitively, through Dueling Nexus. And a few in the other section, probably referring to something like, let's say, like Duel Links or maybe other Yu-Gi-Oh! Games. In terms of how long players actually play on these simulators, most looks like, anywhere between less than 3 hours or 4 to 10 hours per week. There is a small percent playing 30 plus hours per week. That's essentially like a full-time job at that point. So, you know what? Okay, pretty committed there. So now let's cover some favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! Online content from, let's say YouTube or Twitch. And so the #1, again, is actually series videos. This essentially refers to something like, let's say, the most normal one being like the Progression series by Simo, which is of course, sparked interest in terms of, creating all kinds of different series out there. Master Saga, there's like also Duel Night. So lots of really great Yu-Gi-Oh! Series content out there. Deck profiles definitely has always been probably traditionally the most common kind of content in Yu-Gi-Oh! And there's just so many other different kind of content, like stream highlights is actually quite high now. Dueling book replays, let's say like the DB Grinder, for example, meme videos, I guess that's a lot of things that Farfa does actually, combo guides, lore is also really interesting to me as well, and a bunch others, and a bunch in the other category. Now let's cover the favorite YouTube/Twitch content creators online. And so we're going to cover top 15, and we're going to start with 15th, Nim, of course, well known for a lot of his, let's say sealed only, like very high quality vlog content, and great to see him posting a lot of videos again. We also have Lithium tied for 15th, very well known for the Cross Bandless Cup, and also essentially, anytime any new cards are announced, I think you kind of flock towards Lithium's channel to learn what the new combos are going to be. Next, we have Pac, and so of course a very good player and a very good person. So provides really strong competitive content that you should certainly follow him. He's obtained a lot of premier event tops, and you can also get coaching by him on Metafy as well that you can check out. So definitely go follow him. Next, we have Reps cards, which is kind of similar to Nim, kind of started in terms of, it's kind of like a sealed only kind of series, but just called Yu-Gi-Oh! From scratch. Really high quality content. Also provides a lot of combo videos as well, at least as it relates to Branded, for example. So really fun to watch. And then we also have Hardleg Gaming. Recently, I think he's more so known for the Chaos Drafts, basically, just picking a card from all the different variety of packs throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history and dueling, and not really sticking to kind of like the meta, right? So very interesting gameplay as well. At number 10, we have the Duologs, which perhaps is a little poetic because he is known for his top 10s, really highly edited videos, and if there was a contest for like the smoothest voice among Yugitubers, I think this guy might be it. And then next we have Rada, who's very well known for, like let's say his archetype archives, going over these archetypes in depth, but also combined with his sense of humor. And then we have the DB Grinder, so really good for competitive content in terms of replays. I watch his videos a lot. Basically, I find if you're like me, who doesn't have a lot of time to watch, or rather play test a lot, what I do is actually I just watch a ton of DB Grinder videos on like 2x speed just to kind of catch up. It's almost kind of similar to like cramming for a final exam during school. Really, really helpful if you're kind of in like my situation. Next we have tied for 7th, fellow Torontonian Kevin Distant Coder. Really congrats. He recently hit the 100k mark at the time of recording this video, so huge congrats to him for his accomplishments. Originally known for a lot of his like ruling videos, lately more so focusing on Master Duel content, but nonetheless exploding onto the scene for a reason, so congrats to you, Kevin. And then also tied at 7th is Simo, of course. As I mentioned earlier, he is the creator of the Progression series, kind of like a pioneer of sorts of like all the kind of different series content that exploded afterwards from that. And so, a big Yugitubing name for quite some time now, and most recently providing content on Master Duel Masochist, also a very fun series to watch. And so now let's just cover the top 5 content creators in a little bit more detail. And so we're actually going to start off with the Zeev, so the Alter Guy Squad himself, more recently known for his Master Saga as well as Master Roulette in terms of kind of like more draft-based, Master Duel gameplay content. Really fun to watch, and also has been traditionally known to provide a lot of commentary in terms of, let's say, like certain decks or certain cards, why they're good, why they're not good. So definitely well-deserved, and congrats to you, Doug. Next we have Luke Von Karma. So I'm going to be honest, I don't follow Twitch content at all in general, so I'm a little bit lacking in that regard in terms of content knowledge, but I do know he's also on YouTube, and he's actually been exploding quite a bit actually, and so provides like really funny Master Duel content, so definitely go check him out. Next we have Joshua Schmidt, of course, extremely good player, is a world champion for Master Duel actually, and has a lot of premier event tops as well. Provides really good competitive content in terms of, let's say like tier lists, or whether certain cards or decks are good or bad. So really insightful, and it's really great to see that we're starting to have all these really good players start creating content, such as Joshua Schmidt, as well as Jesse Conn, for example. So really good to see. And number 2, we have the one and only Farfa, of course, really well known for a lot of his funny meme videos. His Table 500 compilation of kind of like the jankiest combo is also very fun to watch. And so to me as well, Farfa has done a lot for me in terms of helping me grow my channel over the years. I definitely would not be here if it was not for him. So definitely a huge thanks to Farfa, and a huge congrats to Farfa as well for constantly being one of the most favorite YouTube / Twitch content personalities. And then finally, the number 1 favorite content creator for the 2nd year in a row actually is Mr. MVT Yu-Gi-Oh! Joseph Rothschild. So huge congrats to you. Obviously, has done a lot for the Yu-Gi community, has provided a lot of interesting content, most well known for his 10-minute testing, basically trying out a bunch of different decks, and honestly being able to commentate faster than probably anyone else possibly could, as well as, Jank Bank, let's say, for, a bunch of different Jank decks, and just a lot of different other great content. So a big congrats to honestly all of you in the Yugitubing or whatever Twitch content creation scene. Hopefully people are showing appreciation to all of you. And then finally, let's sort of kind of taper off this survey video now with just some fun related questions. Favorite Yu-Gi-Oh protagonist. This is actually the same as last year, essentially. Yusei, really from 5Ds being really preferred favorite, as well as Jaden from GX. Yugi, the original protagonist, not getting that much love, honestly, and the rest of the anime characters really not getting any love at all for the most part. Now, in terms of the favorite DM characters, Monster is your favorite, and Blue Eyes does come out on top, followed by Red Eyes, and again, Dark Magician. That Yugi's Ace Monster is not as popular. Blue Eyes, I think, definitely makes more sense, especially when you kind of look at like the pricing of some of these collector items that involve Blue Eyes. It's definitely always higher than the rest of these cards. And then also the favorite Egyptian god card. In this instance, Slifer Yugi's Monster actually comes out on top. This was definitely my favorite as well, watching it as a kid. I think, Ra has always been like the least favorite, I think. It's just kind of not that interesting. Obelisk Kaiba, that was also really cool, but Slifer, I think, always looked the coolest. Now, in terms of the favorite special summoning mechanic, so Synchro being really high, I guess that makes kind of sense. It definitely was a pretty interesting gimmick. And Xyz being also up there. Fusion being the first kind of like extra deck summoning mechanic from the original days, getting a decent amount of love. I'm kind of surprised Link was actually at 15%. I thought people really did not like Link summoning. I mean, we do have a lot of competitive players respond to survey. Maybe that might have a reason to do with it. But Pendulum, pretty low. I mean, realistically, I don't even think Konami likes Pendulum summoning at this point. And Ritual almost always never really got any love. In terms of the favorite monster attribute, Dark comes out on top by far, which again kind of reflects how Konami has been treating it as well, because clearly they love Dark monsters, and I'm pretty sure if you were to count all the different monster attributes, Dark probably comes out on top by far. Now finally, in terms of the favorite monster type, there's a lot. There's actually like 20 plus, including the new illusion type, but I'm only going to cover the top 10. And dragon, again, another type that Konami clearly favors the most, definitely comes out on top. But you know what, machine came out in second, which was actually my choice for Cyber Dragons, so that's kind of cool to see. And you even have something like Cybers and Worm, which are actually some of the more newer types that still made it on here, so you know what, pretty cool to see this kind of breakdown. Anyway, so that was it for the video. That was definitely a really long data video for my standards. A big thanks to all of you for sticking around and watching the video. A big thanks to any of you who participated in the survey. A huge thanks to my patrons as always for supporting the channel, and well, take care guys.